you are an estate agent, you want your voice to be heard. Today, we are joined by Simon Leadbetter and some of the biggest names in the estate and letting agency industry to talk about his survey of over 800 estate agents in his survey called The Voice of the Agent. In this particular video, we're going to be talking about the importance of PropTech. Simon Whale, you are the king of PropTech.
Self-professed.
Obviously. How important is PropTech in estate agency in helping estate agents be better agents?
It's vital, but it's only in the sense that it's just it's a really, really important tool, isn't it? At the end of the day, there, I think I famously relabeled the CRM company that I used to work for a PropTech company at the very stage that agents started getting sick of the PropTech because there was so much of it out there and there was a lot of false promises and everything else. But I've been lucky enough to work with some of the very best agents in this country and around the world. And there hasn't been an agent yet that can't be improved by the right bit of PropTech. How you implement it, you know, the amount that you implement and the time that you implement it, that's the critical factor in success.
Let's bring in Paul from TwentyEA. Paul, one of the biggest issues with PropTech is multiple logins and integration. Why do you think that's such a big issue? Why aren't firms talking to each other?
I think collaboration is going to be a big thing for PropTech suppliers. So I think as it is for agents, I think as we grow, PropTech suppliers are going to have to work together more because it's clear from this survey that agents are getting fed up of working with multiple suppliers that don't talk to each other. I can speak on behalf of TwentyEA, which is my business. We try and integrate as much as we can with CRM systems. So from a personal point of view, this is something we're big in, and I think actually suppliers are getting a lot better at this. So as an example, we have a product called Match, which can screen an agent's CRM system. So agents are sat with thousands, hundreds of thousands of data in their CRM system. We can screen that and identify all the properties within there on the market or even likely to instruct in the future, which is massive value to an agent. They don't have to spend any money on marketing. They can kind of have this within their CRM. And I think there's lots of integrations around suppliers working together. So I think it is improving, but there's a lot more space to improve as well.
Simon, I think a big responsibility here are the CRM providers. And there's an awful lot of, there's hundreds of PropTech firms and they all want to try and get their PropTech solution integrated in with the CRM. There are some CRM firms that are charging an awful lot of money. Whose responsibility, if you could change one thing, what would it be to help the estate agents out there?
You're absolutely right, and Paul's right. They are getting much better. Traditionally, it was a very, very closed shop, wasn't it? They are however you want to look at it. The CRMs are the source of truth, and they need to be because otherwise you end up with loads of different silos of data. You end up with duplication. There's GDPR issues. There's just a load of different things there. I think what some of the companies have been doing, going down the route, obviously famously Reap It with Foundations. Alto has launched its API tools as well. Street famously has got a really, really good reputation with doing it. So they are moving. I just think it's the pace, isn't it? That's the frustration here. What I think is the biggest one that we will see, and my prediction over the next year is if it develops, is there are products out there in the wider world, things called Zapier, which is middleware that essentially joins up generic systems. There's products out there now. There's one just on the radar of people called GlueDog, which is going to be the property version of Zapier. A product like that or another one like that, then it gives you that ability to not just do the integration once into that tool and not have to do it for the 30 plus CRMs is going to be a game changer. Whether it delivers or not is the key.
Simon.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question that you started with because this is the second year we've run the survey. And this is the second time this issue has come up as the #1 issue, is the integration of all this PropTech. It's one of the biggest frustration 2 years in a row. I think my frustration would be when we do the survey next year, it comes up again as the #1 frustration.
And I think, just to add, I think suppliers have not got to be greedy. So lots of suppliers now have open APIs, which essentially means as a developer, you can kind of work on integrations free of charge without many restrictions and do it that way. There's still suppliers out there that are trying to charge up front for API calls when it's in the development stage, which is counterproductive because it just puts off agents or suppliers working with each other and it doesn't go anywhere. So
it's another blocker, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a blocker, and I think where you can, I think all suppliers should work together to almost remove all these blockers and work together more.
Frictionless, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think one of the key things as well you've got to understand is, well, what does integration mean? Because there's a very big difference between what some of the CRMs will allow. Everyone now that claims they've got integration with XYZ. Well, to one supplier, integration might be just firing off an email. I can tell you now, that isn't what an agent wants. They want two-way integration without the need to log into different systems.
Single sign-on.
Single sign-on, and it's a spectrum of capability on that thing then, isn't it? So that's where I think, where we've said it's changing but not fast enough. They've gone that first stage. Doubling down on that, I think, is where it could get really good going forwards.
Yeah, so expanding on that, I still think there's a significant challenge in our industry where tech is still seen as not as necessary as perhaps it is in other industries. I bet if we looked at the percentage of tech spend as a percentage of companies' revenue in the property industry versus, let's say, retail, gaming, or whatever, I bet property is way, way lower than the average across other sectors. So I still think there's a fundamental resistance, almost a kind of, dare I say, a Luddite type approach to adopting technology. What's really interesting on page 105 of the report is the one task that agents would like to see PropTech do. And they're all really, really valid. I mean, particularly around lead generation, lead nurture, lead categorization, and so on. But I still get the sense from the agents that I talk to that they're still resistant to invest, spend, and actually see this stuff in place working, even though, look, we all know it will be to their benefit. So I guess the question is, how do we get around that attitude, that kind of traditional attitude to not adopting technology?
It's amazing how many people haven't heard of any of them.
What's that percentage?
Well, I mean, if you think about, say, take 20EA, there's about 25% of people haven't heard of 20EA?
Isn't that a wider issue, though, that we all get caught up in our little bubbles? We bounce around, the conferences, and we think, and things like that, and we bounce around the different affiliation networks and everything else. There is a huge demographic out there that gets most of their contact from getting a Property Industry Eye update a day or anything else out there. And that is a real challenge. So I don't know. I hear the Luddite thing put out there, but what's fascinating, seeing all these challenges, these are the ones that we see week in, week out when we do our reviews with agents, and they literally always talk, literally word for word, exactly the same order, integration, too many systems, multiple logins and everything else out there. But they still, in our dashboards, we can log how many suppliers, and bearing in mind this is over 7,000 offices now. It's changed from when we started 4 years ago, where they used to have 21 different suppliers. And this is just estate and lettings agency specific ones. And it's gone up to 23 now. So they are using tech. They're using a huge amount of tech.
At the moment, I still think there's a significant amount of people, particularly if they're getting loads and loads of calls from PropTech suppliers, present company accepted, of course. No, but they are. They're getting CRMs.
There's over 1,000.
Yeah,
There's over 1,000.
And as the boss of a business, particularly a small business, you're getting calls and emails constantly, buy this, buy this, buy this. Perhaps we're not selling the benefits.
Definitely not selling the benefits. And we focus on the customer's need and the problem you solve, rather than the tech itself.
But if you only but you can buy it if you just sell one more house.
Yeah.
Well,
that argument.
One more.
One more house.
Put it into context. There's only, from our last records, there's 12 procurement managers in this industry, literally, that are involved with that whole deal, dealing with the suppliers. Most of it falls on to somebody else's task, doesn't it, as an accidental. Thank God it does, otherwise I wouldn't exist here. But it's really, really hard keeping up to speed. And the biggest single thing is, let's face it, a lot of this stuff here is, it's actually quite difficult to do out of the box. And like me, if something doesn't work straight away, I give up on it. And there is a propensity to give up on stuff too soon before you've actually made it work.
It's interesting. I had a phone call this morning from a PropTech supplier, and what makes them really good as PropTech suppliers makes them, that skill set makes them absolutely appalling at marketing.
Yeah.
If they were good at marketing, Kerfuffle wouldn't exist, would it?
Yeah.
And I think they're really bad at they're very good at telling people what it does, but not what it does for the agent.
So many of them are ivory tower techies. And by the way, I don't mean that disparagingly, because there's loads of really, the fact that there is over 1,000 in there shows the innovation that's out there on there. But they tend to be techies that have had a great idea, and that point then, in terms of, well, of course, if they're techies, they're not going to be joined up and understand it. And many of them haven't come from the estate agency world. Now, there is a brilliant growing trend, which I've labelled PropTech 3.0, which is the agents doing it for themselves, the likes of the Christian Byfields with Depository, you know, Mike Nettleton and all of these guys who have been frustrated in their own businesses that whatever the packages aren't doing the job, and they've actually then gone out there and done it themselves. That's a really exciting, because that minimises that whole horrible phrase, but that minimum viable product phase is much, much narrower, isn't it? And they just have to enable it for other businesses. So I think that's a really interesting trend that you'll see much more of.
I think it's a really interesting conversation from the point of view of our business staging property. So essentially we're a supplier into the estate agency industry, and unusually internationally I set up a business with a CRM, with an accounts package, we then invented, if you like, we had developed our own business intelligence app because it simply didn't exist, and we couldn't get the data that we needed to evidence the power of what we do. So we developed all of that, and then went out to find APIs that we could actually join them up with, which work in various, you know, some are good and some are not, and some of them last for a long time and some of them just dump you after a bit, which is quite frustrating. However, what I do also think is that as the PropTech industry grows for estate agencies, and I completely agree with you, Russell, in that it's a very hard barrier to overcome with some of the agents, that actually it's not just about the CRM for selling the house. It should also incorporate the other things of the stuff that we do. You know, if I could get just one field in one CRM that then feeds information back to something like 20EA that says, was this property staged or not before selling, then the amount of data that is out there that evidences
which you can then demonstrate to future agents
impact,
to their benefit.
Yes. But can I find a CRM supplier that will actually put that field in? You know, it is deeply frustrating.
Paul?
Yeah, I just want to touch on the why I think the adoption of tech's a struggle. And if you look at the nature of the UK property industry, it's unlike any other industry. So there are about 20,000 estate and letting agents in the UK. 92% of those are one or two branch
So
firms.
a really long tail, isn't
So
it?
the top 100 brands out of that 20,000 do about 40% of the business.
And getting bigger and bigger,
So
aren't
the
they?
massive corporates, of course, they're going to easily adopt tech. They've got big teams that can do that. But the vast majority of the industry are small independents who've probably been operating 20, 30, 40 years. And I think tech still scares them, and there's a lack of understanding. So the challenge for the 1,000 PropTech suppliers is almost an education piece, because it's a really long tail, and it's hard work and expensive as a supplier looking at it selfishly to go around and talk to all of those. So I think that's the challenge. There's lots of little firms in the industry, and it's very and there's lots of consolidation. There's things going down. There's the self-employed models rising, but it's a very interesting sector in that terms.
Simon.
Going back to your point there, yeah, in terms of how many there are, everything else there, and I think your one is one of the key things that suppliers should be challenging them on. For far too long, and I made this the biggest mistake myself, all we've worried ourselves about as suppliers is, what does the estate agency owner think about it? And what we should be thinking about, what does this product do for the consumer? Because famously, Rightmove, they will say that's not the case. They don't care about the agent, do they? But if you take the consumer with you, you will take the agents as well. And so much more time and attention needs to be done for whatever solution. How does it benefit the consumer? And not getting back to the one more listing point, but we actually need to take that back, because one of the things is, it's such a lazy comment to make. But if you're not doing that, if you're not making that point, then you're not making an ROI argument, are you?
So, I mean, I'm a massive fan of PropTech. I had a tech background when I worked in Cambridge, working with startups, and I'm a huge adopter of technology. But I know there's a lot of people in the industry who aren't like that. The one thing I'd say about all technology is it's not the solution. Technology is not a solution in of itself. It's an amplifier of what you do. It can amplify whatever you do. Now, the reality of our industry, that we'll talk about this later, doesn't really understand the principles of marketing, is it allows you to amplify a lot of dross. The ability to send more things to more people isn't necessarily good for your business. If you're sending rubbish messages that aren't targeted to the wrong people, you're just annoying people and damaging the reputation of the industry. If you start with the right message for the right audience, PropTech is fantastic to get it to as many people as possible. But if you're writing tripe, we are drowning in content at the moment.
I just want to say thank you for everyone for their input on that. Very insightful, and please do check out the report where there's an awful lot more data. The voice of the agent.